Hello, and welcome to Monumental, where we sit down with entrepreneurs, leaders, visionaries, and big thinkers making monumental change. Here's your host, Evan Holiday.
Welcome to Monumental. I'm your host, Evan Holiday, and today on the show, we have with us Alex Vidal. Alex, how you doing, man?
I'm doing excellent, man. How you doing?
Doing well. Glad we finally get to connect. Alex and I have been following each other and keeping up with each other on Instagram. That's what the beauty of social media and Instagram is. We can have this connection and keep up with each other and see, being able to see your growth in real estate and helping others and your podcast, The Closers Club, has been really great for me. And at some point, I was like, man, we got to get Alex on the show.
Thanks, man. Likewise, the first question I said was, how many doors are you up to? I saw you just close like another 20 doors. I'm in awe, man. And you're only 30, which is the most impressive part about it.
Yes. Well, I'm glad we finally get to connect. So everybody listening, a little bit about Alex before we get started. He is a regional vice president for Coldwell Banker Realty in Dallas, Fort Worth, overseeing 10 offices, 850 realtors, and over $2 billion in closed sales. Those are some big numbers, Alex. I'm excited to dive into all that. He's been in real estate for over 23 years. He's worked at many, many different companies. It looks like all over the country, from California, Colorado, and Miami, and including recruiting director, sales coach, sales manager, and sales. And not to mention, he is the host of the Closer Club, where he's had on names like Dan Fleischman, Bobby Castro, Jordan Zimmerman, just some phenomenal guests and really, really great content. So with that, Alex, let's just dive right into a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, man. So, like you got started at 19 years old in multifamily investing. I got involved in real estate at 19, not because I had visions of doing real estate or anything like that. I had my first son at 19. I have 4 boys, 23, 13, and 10-year-old twins. And I needed a job, and I started off as the secretary to the owner of the largest real estate company in Florida. And, 8 months into it, I would always hear him complaining about hiring a bunch of agents, but losing a bunch of agents a month. And I said, listen, you're only paying me 21 grand a year. Do you mind, if I started recruiting to make some extra money? And that was the spark that kind of took me throughout these different paths of, recruiting directors for some of the biggest real estate companies in Florida, California, Colorado, now Texas. Sales director or sales manager, sales coach, president, regional vice president, all that stuff. So it's all I know. Real estate's all I know.
That's awesome. And so it sounds like you kind of coincidentally came into this by working through somebody else. Is that right?
What do you mean? In what way?
When you first started working for the group when you were 19 years old.
Yeah. What happened was, so I needed a job because I had my son. I was going to school full time, working full time. Had my family full time, but I was a camp counselor. I was making like $10 an hour. And when I started trying to get serious about my career, I actually had 2 options on the table. And one was to work with Mike Pappas, who's the owner of the Kai's company, which is still to this day the largest independently owned real estate company in Florida, or go sell advertising at the Miami Herald, because my mom was at the Herald and she just retired after 50 years. The only reason I took the job at Kai's with Mike Pappas was because I got the job on my own versus a job that my mom got me. I didn't want the stress, I didn't want that held over me. And it really started there. I'm still very close with Mike to this day. But he took a chance not only on hiring this kid as a secretary, but as letting me recruit for them, and then getting eventually promoted to their recruiting director like at 20. And then from there, I got poached out to California. Got separated from my 23-year-old's mother out there, came back, did it for Prudential here. When that guy for Prudential here went to Colorado, he brought me to Colorado. So I've been poached all along. And then most recently in Dallas, I was running this large real estate company in Florida that when I took it over, we only had like 40 something realtors. when at its peak, we had almost 600. And then I had this opportunity to work with the largest real estate company in the world, and in the middle of a pandemic. And how can you say no to that? So I took the risk. Here we are.
I love it. I love the amount of times that you've pivoted and grown and basically taken, leaps of faith and moved all over the country.
It's the only way
Um,
to do it, man. It's no fun
yeah,
any other way, you know?
I love that. I love that. I do want to dive into that, but I want to back up a little bit as far as starting out working for Mike Pappas in Florida.
Mhm.
What gave Mike Pappas the confidence in you to basically, like you said, at 20 years old, give you the position of director of recruiting?
Man, I wish I could remember, Evan. I don't know. It was a long time ago. It was 23 years ago.
Yeah.
Listen, Mike. It's interesting. I see a lot of me, or I see a lot of Mike in me now, particularly. Mike's 60 something now, so he was in his mid 40s when I started. I'm 42 now. So I think he saw in me a kid that was like him. Somebody who had a lot of energy, a lot of passion, who obviously had a motivating factor outside of just making money. It was like, yeah, I had to make money, but I had to provide it for the family. And at that point in time, I think they were just losing so many agents. They were bringing in 70 or 80 agents a month, but they were losing 70 or 80 agents a month. So they're making all this effort with no progress. Well, why don't we just give this kid a try? Let's see what he can do. And within 8 months, I was promoted to the recruiting director, because I was literally picking up the phone, not cell phones, but picking up the landline
Yeah.
and calling them and saying, I don't even remember what I would say, but setting up all these appointments with these brand new agents getting into the business. And he essentially asked me to then train all the different offices on how to do it. And that's how it kind of took off.
That's great. And what for you? How did you get good at recruiting? What for you made that work? And
Time in the saddle, man.
yeah,
It's like anything in life. It's time in the saddle. I think one of the biggest things that I don't think salespeople do enough of is role playing. And so the role playing component is so important, particularly if you don't have a lot of at bats. So if you're in sales and you're only pitching once a day or once a week, that's really not a lot of time to get your at bats, right?
yeah,
So the only way you can replicate that is by literally practicing. And by virtue of my podcast, I've had some of, forget salespeople, but some of the top athletes in the world, some people, politicians, my best friend who's a police officer, and you ask him, like, how are you handling these high pressure situations? Like this guy, George Hincapie, who raced with Lance Armstrong. It's like, how do you handle those high pressure situations? He's like, man, we spend thousands and thousands of hours on the bike. So when the time came to actually compete, we knew we put in the time.
yeah.
My buddy, who was the police officer, who's actually a pilot for Invicta Watches, the owner of Invicta Watches too. I'm like, all right, flight emergency, a guy pulls a gun on you. How do you know what to do? He's like, easy. It's muscle memory. So I will tell you that I sucked at recruiting in the beginning. I sucked at my show in the beginning,
Yeah.
but it was just time in the saddle, repetition, the muscle memory, and that's how I got good at it.
Yeah. Putting in the work, getting in the saddle. I love that.
That
And
easy.
and
That's simple, by the way. It really is that simple. There's no magic pill.
yeah. Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it's just like getting your at bats in. And if you don't have the opportunity to get those at bats in, then try to create that through the role playing or through some other, simulation type effect where you can practice time and time again and put in the work until you overcome that hurdle of, like you said, like you were crappy when you started, but
Right.
you worked through that. You worked that muscle until you got stronger.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the show is a perfect example. Everybody's like, but Alex, 100. This week was 119 episodes in, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're so good on camera or whatever." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, go back and look at episode number one, and episodes 1 through 20, and you'll see I wasn't."
Yeah.
And it took that many episodes to get to a point where I felt really comfortable and not get nervous anymore. And if something happened, because I film it live, if something happened, whatever, you just learn to roll. And but again, it's time in the saddle.
So for you on the recruiting side, within these real estate companies that you've worked for and where you're at currently, is your main focus on the recruitment side, or is it also on the deal side?
So I don't deal doctor as much as I used to. My prior role as president of RelatedISG, which was my former brokerage, even then in the beginning when I was, president, but also the sales managers for the offices, you get involved in the deal doctoring. After that, really, when you get to the higher level for me, I would tell you that 80% of my time is spent in what I call the raving fan territory. Great book, by the way. Not my favorite book. I know you're going to ask that. I'll share that with you in a minute. But you got to be in that raving fan territory and making sure that your existing agents are raving fans of your brokerage, of their office, of their sales manager in their office, maybe even as me as leader, but more importantly, the office, the sales manager in the brokerage. And if they are raving fans, cool. What can we do to continue that going? And if they're not raving fans, how do we make them raving fans? But that falls in line with recruiting, because in recruiting a salesperson in real estate, at least, you really got to do a good job of asking the what and how questions and breaking them down to know whether or not by bringing this agent on board, you're going to be able to make them a raving fan of your company. If I hire an agent knowing that I'm not going to make them a raving fan, I'm better off telling them to stay where they're at. But if I know, and I'm very open about this, I'll tell an agent, I'm going to ask a million questions. And my goal is this: if I can't make you a raving fan, I'm going to tell you stay where you're at, or I'm going to tell you where to go interview. If I know I can make you a raving fan, just be ready. I'm going to be relentless in bringing you on board. But that becomes a lot easier when you have raving fans in your company that are telling you, hey, Alex, you should go meet with Evan. He's a great agent. We just did a deal together. He's expecting your call. And when you grow that way, you grow significantly better and quicker.
That's crazy. I love that. So really, it sounds like your zone of genius is in that, like, finding talent and then empowering that talent to really do their highest and best work.
Zone of genius. I love that. I love that term. I learned that from Bedros Keuilian, the founder of Fit Body Bootcamp. But Bedros got it from somebody else. I don't remember. But yeah, 100%. I joke. So I get a company issued computer. Okay. And the company issued computer is the only way that I can actually tap into the true financials of the company. Okay. I haven't opened that computer. I've been on the job 4 months. I haven't opened that computer from day one. Okay. And I don't say that like, oh, it doesn't mean I'm not paying attention to the financials. I'm very much in tune with the financials. But if there's anything I need, I rely on the people like my finance girl, Tiffany. I'll email Tiffany, hey, Tiffany, I need this report. Or Don, who's my assistant, hey, Don, I need you to pull this report for me. Because me spending 10 minutes going into the system, finding it, what exactly do I need? It may take me 30 minutes, and I can coach an agent in 30 minutes and still have the information at the end of the 30 minutes. So yeah, 100%. Those are my zone of genius for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And that's something we talk about with our company, Holiday Ventures, is how can we all be performing at our highest and best use, and be focused in on exactly what we are the best at doing, and where we can add the most value to the company and our projects. And that's something we talk about all the time, is exactly what you're saying is, my role at being able to lead the company comes down to, high level negotiations. It comes down to setting the direction and the vision. And those two things, along with training the company and building the company and making sure we have the right resources to fulfill our big vision, that's where I need to be spending the majority of my time. Like you said, it's not going through, going through as many of the details. It's about setting the vision and executing on that vision.
Yeah, and that was a big thing for me in adjusting, because the other company where I came from, we were privately owned. We operate, even though we were very successful, we operated on a shoestring budget. So you were kind of like the end all be all. You kind of did a little bit of everything. Here we have a plethora of resources afforded to us, because we are a public company, of people that I can call on and really help me get what I need, so that I can go out and do what I do best. And really what I do best is either in front of an agent, coaching them, or recruiting them, or with my management team, coaching them or helping them in a recruiting interview. Because even though I'm great at recruiting, there's only one of me, but I have 10 sales managers. And if I can get those 10 sales managers really good at recruiting and efficient, well, they're going to be able to do their job a lot easier. And if they're able to do their job a lot easier, then they have a call, hey, Alex, then they have a quality of life. I told you I have a window behind me, or behind the camera, so they're passing by. Then I can help them have a better quality of life. So we're trying to help them get to a certain clear goal. And if I can help them get there more efficiently, then they have more time to go do whatever they want to do. If they want to work more,
Yeah.
cool. But then they can go on vacation if they want, or
Yeah.
enjoy their family.
And afford that lifestyle as well.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
So it really sounds like part of your not only recruiting, but also like coaching and mentoring as well.
A lot of it is coaching and mentoring. I would, again, recruiting sounds like it's a big piece of it, but when I get involved with a recruit, it's typically they've already made it past the first line of defense, is what I call it. Like they've met with the manager's already done the value proposition to Coldwell Banker. Now they're saying, hey, Alex, listen, this is a big enough agent that I need you to meet with to help bring them on board. Other than that, we coach our agents all day, like every day. I have different coaching sessions going on. And now what I'm really working on the transition is coaching my managers from who to prospect. Once they have identified who they're going to target, we'll jump like on a Zoom call. And what they'll do is, rather than like, listening in through a recording or something, we do real time coaching. So let's say you and I were doing a coaching session together. You're one of my sales managers. You're about to call a recruit. Depending on the type of recruit, will determine what you say. Will be on cam. I'll turn my camera off and I'll mute myself so that you don't feel pressured that you see me looking at you. And I'll tell you, open up your chat, and I'll just listen to the conversation. And then if I see an opportunity, I've learned to type really fast. I'll type in a question, and then you hear the manager ask a question, and then you hear the reaction, and then all of a sudden, our average conversion of, for 1 out of every 4 people that we were talking to, we've been able to double that. And now we're getting 2 out of every 4 people want to meet with us instead of 1. And we're just getting started. Now the next step is coaching them. Okay, now I got Evan in front of me. How am I what's the interview process like, so that I can just, close Evan? And in the short amount of time that I've been here, Coldwell Banker measures regions based on growth. So, little story. So RelatedISG is actually the largest real estate company in the world. And RelatedISG owns the Coldwell Banker, Century 21, ERA, Better Homes and Garden, Sotheby's, Corcoran, Real Estate Brands, and a couple other City Habitats.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then they also own Cardis Relocation, which is the largest relocation network in the world. For the most of those brands, they're franchises, but for certain ones, they're corporate-owned stores. So, which is primarily under Coldwell Banker. I work for the corporate-owned stores of RelatedISG, and I oversee all of DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth. And so what they do is they take all the corporate-owned regions. There's 43 of them, and they rank them based on experienced agents that they've brought to the company. Right? Growth is a big thing for us. It doesn't matter how big your region is. Mine's 10. My buddy Brad in Southern California has 29. Okay. And we're measured the same. Okay. It doesn't matter. It's just how many experienced agents have you been able to bring on board? Just in the 4 months that I've been here, we've gone from number 17 out of 43 to number 7 in the country. And everybody ahead of me has at least 15 offices or more. Wow. And it's just not, I don't want to say holding them accountable, because we have weekly accountability calls, but we can get into that if you want. It's more just, how are we measuring where they're lacking, seeing where the opportunity is to improve, plugging myself in there to help them improve, and then we're seeing these pretty big results.
That's pretty amazing in 4 months. I mean, it seems like from an outsider's perspective, you're like, man, at 4 months, you're probably just still getting acclimated to the new company culture and new people, new faces, new systems,
everything. Well, okay, so that's an interesting thing. I again, going back to, not logging into the computer, the company into the financials. I have to look at the things and say, what's going to move the needle in my region, right? Yeah. Knowing how to get into MIS and operate, that doesn't move the needle in my region. What moves the needle in my region is making sure that the agents we have stay with Coldwell Banker, and adding to that with other great agents. That's across the board. That's what moves my needle. So that's where all my attention is. There's a plethora of other things that I need to know and that I need to learn. But even from a value proposition standpoint, as long as I know enough, I just need to know a little bit about each one, so that based on how you do your business. There may be 20, but if I know how all 20 work from a perception level, like I'm not gonna be the guy to sit in there and show you physically how the system works. As long as I know from a perception level how it works, I'll talk to you. You're going to tell me how you do your business. I'm going to pick the 3 or 4 things that I know can make a dramatic impact in your business, and I'm only going to focus on that. And that's a great kind of 1-2 punch with my sales manager and I. My sales manager knows everything about Coldwell Banker, all the tools, how they work, the nitty gritty, the minutia. Cool, let them do that. I'll be the big picture guy. Let me show you how I'm going to take your business from where it's at, increase it in the next year by 25%, show you how our tools can do that, and away we go.
That's amazing. I love that. And what's funny is it sounds similar to something when people ask me, they're like, what makes a good developer? I typically tell them, I said, it really comes down to, it's very similar to what you just said. It comes down to developers really know and understand that there's 10 to 20 issues, obstacles in your way of getting these developments done. And there's a lot of moving pieces, but good developers know how to pick out the 1 to 2 issues, the dominoes, that if you knock that down, then all the others will be a lot easier or will just be obsolete.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. 100%. Everybody, listen. The one thing I love. I have a mentor. Doesn't mentor me as much because he's the brother-in-law of the owner of the company I left, right? So I can see why he doesn't mentor me as much. But him and I talk all the time. We actually just talked 2 days ago, and he always talked about, hey, Alex, what are the KPIs? What are your KPIs, et cetera? And the reality is that at my prior brokerage, because we were small, the KPIs were very hard to track. And now the converse of that here at Realogy is, I think there's not one single data point that's not measured and that I can't get a report on. So now we have all the KPIs, but again, I have 1 million KPIs. I'm not worried about the million. I'm focused on the 2 or 3 that are going to move my needle.
So that brings up a good point. What do you recommend for our listeners as far as setting up KPIs and then being accountable for those KPIs?
Well, you have to look at what the accountables are. You have to look at what the KPIs are that are going to make the impact in your business. For us, it's pretty easy. It's how many calls are you making to recruits? Out of those calls that you're making, how many are you speaking to? Out of the ones that you spoke to, how many actually agreed to meet with you? Okay, then actually, how many people did you interview? How many did you hire out of the ones that you've interviewed? What kind of production did they have? I also measure how many calls you made to your existing agents from a proactive basis. Not, okay, Evan, you have a problem, so you're calling me the deal doctor. I'm calling you and saying, hey, Evan, we haven't talked in a week. How you doing? Because again, my realtors are independent contractors, so they come in whenever they want. How many one-on-one group coaching sessions did they have? How many group coaching sessions did they have? Did they have a sales meeting? And how many social media posts they had? And every Friday we get on a call collectively and we track that. And the reason we do that is because those are the KPIs that for me are going to make a difference. If I know you're if I know you're making the calls, you're going to speak to a certain amount of people. If you're not able to convert those people to interviews, well, that's that domino right then and there. You're not going to have any options if you're not getting in front of people. So that's my first domino that I work on. Then it's like, okay, well, hey, Evan, you met with 10 people, but you didn't hire anybody. Well, crap, what are you saying in the interview? Like, then we got to work. But great, that's keeping your front door full, but then you got to make sure the back door is shut. Well, realtors are constantly getting poached. How do you keep that back door shut? Well, you put your arm around your agents, make an impact, continue to coach them, let them see the value in you as a leader and in the brokerage. And then from a social media perspective, your competition is always going to talk trash about what you do. You can't control what they're going to say. The power of social media is you're able to control your own narrative. So regardless of what your competition says, if you're not putting out a message to the message that you want, then everybody's going to believe what your competition is saying. And so for me, those are my KPIs. Those, like, it's very simple, right? Agents make us money. There's no other way we make money. We make money off our agents. And so are your agents making you money? Are you helping them make money? And are you bringing in agents who can add to your bottom line? So that's what you got to find in your business, whatever that business may be.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And like you said, I think, the back end of it is, if agents they're the ones that are making the income for Coldwell, you really on the front end or on the back end, I should say, like you said, really cultivating those relationships to make sure, they look up to you, you provide that leadership to them, and you're providing that impact and helping them, empower them to have the right tools to succeed.
Yeah, man. And listen, real estate, it's interesting. Real estate. So I think real estate companies do one of two things right. I think you have real estate companies that have great leadership and no tools. And then I think you have real estate companies that have great tools and not great leadership. Very few do both right. We happen to do both right here, but if we're not making that effort and showing our agents, then what good does it do?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, a quick side note, what we use at Holiday Ventures, we use Traction and the EOS as our, operating system for our company. But I think it's really important, like you said, to find those tools and that system that works for you as a business and combine that with the good leadership. And obviously always developing your leadership skills and always continuing to learn and pour into your mindset and your personal growth, so that you can then turn around and give that back to your team and to your company.
Absolutely. Like, listen, I could talk about recruiting all day, but get into and P&Ls I feel pretty comfortable with, but the way public companies measure, the way public companies look at every data point and every KPI, that is like I'm walking into Harvard right now without the college education before. And it's exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time, but it really is cool because I'm going to be adding a piece to my arsenal that I currently do not have.
Yeah. So what is driving you? What is pushing you to put in all this work and to make this impact on your team and the world?
And this is going to sound really cocky, but I think I can run a real estate company on a national level. And so, we were talking off camera, kind of like, why would you move to Dallas in the middle of a pandemic? You seem to be having a good gig, your show, all that stuff. And, the reality is that so I worked for a brokerage called RelatedISG. I took it from 45 agents, like I said, to almost 600. They were offering me 25% ownership in the brokerage when I left. I had full reign over that company. Like they were going to close it when I took it over. So I had the ability to do whatever I wanted to do. From a culture perspective, the things that we did there were really cool. It was my baby. The house that we bought at the end of 2016 was on an acre lot. My boys, my small boys, my 13-year-old and my 10-year-old twins, they're always playing. We had a full soccer field in the back. They were like soccer, pool, video games, pool, soccer. They had this rotation. We just put all this money into it. Like we loved it, right? So I wasn't even happy. I was ecstatic at my job, and I loved our home. Like I told you off camera.
Yeah.
Cried a lot when we sold it, but the reality is that I kept telling myself that one day you're going to run a company on a national level, but I wasn't in that arena. And so either I was just blowing smoke up my, or I was going to put myself in that position.
Yeah.
And this was the position that presented itself. And so even though I was happy, it didn't play a role in where I wanted to be, a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now.
That's amazing. So we were talking to give a little background to our listeners. So like you'd mentioned, you basically took that, RelatedISG from, like you said, almost nothing to massively successful. And that's what I was alluding to before we jumped on was you seem to have this amazing thing going in South Florida and really had a lot of momentum. Your podcast is crushing it. You're having all these amazing guests on, a lot of them in South Miami or South Florida. And then all of a sudden out of nowhere, it's like, oh, he's moving to Texas. Yeah. But I think it takes massive, commitment and ability to kind of, take those leaps of faith. And that's where the massive growth happens. I mean, when we moved to Nashville, that was a big move for us. We moved from Louisville to Nashville but that honestly, that was the kind of the kick in the butt that helped us massively grow our vision for our company and for the impact we could have.
Yeah, man, you got to make those moves. And it didn't seem like I had a good job. Like it was, man. Like I really was gaining traction in Florida and in particular in the real estate world because of what we did with the brokerage, because of the podcast and everything that we were doing, like I was definitely making my mark there. Okay.
Yeah.
But again, that mark, at least in South Florida, did not present me the opportunities that I really wanted, for my life. And again, you're going to be telling yourself a story all these times. And you're telling yourself a story. I tell myself a story. Everybody who's going to watch this at some point is going to tell himself a story about, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And then you're going to come across a stage in your life that it's going to be given to you on a platter. And that's where the what I call the come to Jesus moment comes. And you're either going to say, this is what I was built for, let's rock. Or, yeah, that's what I want, but I'm not sure anymore,
Yeah.
and you're either committed or you're interested. So I was committed.
Yeah, exactly. So how did this come about? Was it in the works, or was it just an opportunity that came about all of a sudden for you?
Good question. So let's go back to the end of last year. End of last year, I interviewed Bedros Keuilian for my show, Fit
Yeah.
Body Bootcamp, tell him all these goals that I have. And he figuratively punches me in the face and says, it's all your fault. All the goals that you had that you didn't hit, it's all your fault. And I'm like, he's right. So came home and I read this book called The Secret. Still not my favorite book, but I read this book called The Secret. Okay. And I wrote down 25 manifestations, 11 personal, 8 personal professional that have to do with owning real estate, my show, etc. And then 6 professional. And one of the professional ones, and again, this is going to sound cocky, but these are my manifestations for what I want in my life. And they were, it was, I'm so happy and grateful. I'm the best leader, a leader everybody wants to work for, and everybody wishes they had at their respective company. And every morning at lunch and at dinner, I would repeat those manifestations to myself, all 25. Long story short, within like 2 weeks, this was like end of December, beginning of January, all of a sudden, with like 2 or 3 weeks, boom, my phone starts ringing for job opportunities. And I was honored to be considered, but nothing that put me on the stage that I wanted to go next. And then I get a call from this headhunter. This headhunter goes, hey, Alex, listen, we're calling you. They had talked to me a few years ago. Coldwell Banker is looking for a regional vice president in Orlando. Now I'm in Miami. That's 3 hours away. And I said, well, let me call my buddy. He's a regional vice president for Coldwell Banker in Southern California. Let me call him and ask him what he thinks of the role. And he's like, and we talked about it, and he convinced me to the point that I should at least interview. So by the time I actually got the interview, they had filled Orlando, and then you had Dallas, LA, and Boston as the other opportunities. And I didn't want to do Boston because it's too cold. LA was cool because my buddy worked in Orange County and in San Diego County. So him and I would have been partners essentially. But then that role filled, I went through 11 interviews. That role filled by number 4. And I'm like, Dallas is like some ho-bunk town, man. It's like, it's a bunch of cowboys and all this stuff. And then I started doing the research, and I'm like, oh my God, it's actually the 4th largest metropolitan area in the country. And it's located in the fastest growing state in the country. And I started just researching online, and I'm like, I got to do this. And I accepted the job without ever even flying out here.
That's amazing.
And then I flew out here. Oh yeah, we bought a home, and we didn't, like, everybody's like, just rent. You don't know how long you're gonna be out there. I'm like, nope, we bought. So
yeah, that's amazing, man. And like you said, I mean, you had the manifestations, you had the vision, you had the aha moment with Bedros interview, and all of that led to the culmination of moving to Dallas in the middle of a pandemic and reinventing yourself, and 10xing your ability to reach toward that big, hairy, audacious goal of leading a national firm.
Well, I don't know, but it at least put me. It's been too soon, right? We'll see if the honeymoon lasts.
Yeah.
But meaning, you got to keep it going, right? But I will tell you, it at least put me in that arena. And so if I fail miserably, then I can look back and say, well, at least I tried.
Yeah.
Right? And if I succeed, which I have a feeling I'm going to, because that's just the confidence I have in myself, then I put myself in that arena. If I would have stayed, I know for a fact I would have always been like what if?
Yeah.
What if? You know, because you just don't
Exactly.
know. You just don't know when those other opportunities are going to present itself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
you got to have the guts to pull the trigger.
Yeah, guys, rewind like the last 2 minutes and listen to that again. Lots of value, Alex. I love that. You're right. I mean, you need to be able to pull the trigger. You need to be able to commit. You need to be able to believe in yourself and have that confidence in yourself. I think that's one thing that when I was starting out in real estate and just in multifamily investing in general, I didn't fully believe in myself. But it wasn't until I did, I noticed, like you said, like opportunities just come up left and right when you believe in yourself, you have that confidence, and you have the clear vision of where you're headed, then it's like magic. All these opportunities that are aligned with your goals and your future vision of yourself, they start coming out of nowhere.
They start showing up. You're right. And
Yeah.
the belief component is evident. To me, it's by far the biggest one. I think if I use this example with my agents when I'm teaching the listing presentation class, and I got 4 different things that I go through that, in order, before you even show up at a listing presentation, these are the 4 boxes you got to check off. And the last one is you got to believe in yourself. Because if you don't believe that you're worthy of that $1 million property listing, how do you
Yeah.
ever expect the seller to believe in you?
Yeah.
And what you find is the biggest difference between top producers in any industry, not just real estate, is the difference between expectation and surprise. The salespeople that are surprised when they did a deal or they got a listing, those are typically your low producers. Your highest producers, every time they walk into a listing presentation, every time they have an opportunity to close a deal, every time they have an opportunity to work with a buyer, their expectation is the deal is going to get done. They are
Yeah.
never surprised. Okay. And that's and then I started looking at my management team, and I'm trying to change their focus from don't be surprised when a top producer tells you they want to join you in your office. Expect it. Like
Yeah.
you demand it, right? But again, it's that belief in themselves and in myself or whoever's watching this in themselves.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. One last thing I want to cover before we jump into our monumental questions. Your the closer club. How did that come about? What was the genesis? What was the idea behind that?
Great question. So in South Florida, Dade and Broward County, which is essentially for everybody knows Miami, everybody knows Fort Lauderdale. So in those 2 areas, we had 65,000 licensed realtors. Okay. So for comparison,
Wow.
that is about half the size of the Dallas Fort Worth area. And in the entire metroplex of Dallas Fort Worth, we have 43,000. Okay. Now, if there are 65,000 realtors and people choose to do business with people they like and they trust, how do I convey my energy, my passion, my market know-how, my vibe, my look, my aura, like all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because it's impossible for me to get in front of 65,000 people. So I said, you know what, I'm going to launch a show where I'm going to interview local real estate players, okay? Because people are going to want to watch me interviewing this top realtor or this top developer. It's not about me, but I'll find a way to showcase myself. And that's how it launched. And I just started launching it. And I got in the beginning, they're like, you're doing too many. Nobody's going to want to watch it. You're going to run out of people to interview. People are going to get bored. Like you hear all these excuses from people who either did not understand video or did not understand social media, which by the way is a great learning lesson. Be very careful who you take your advice from. I'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
And about 4 months into it, the Real Deal, which is one of the largest real estate publications in the country, puts on this event in Florida, in Miami, where like 5,000 realtors go, and they always have the same speakers, and they're boring. Okay, and I said, I go to the public relations agency for the Real Deal. I go, put me on stage, get a different vibe up there. Let me do my thing. Okay. And they said, Alex, we love you. We love your brokerage, but the Real Deal doesn't know you or your brokerage. I said, all right, cool. I hung up the phone. And the very first phone call that I made was to Ryan Serhant from $1 Million Listing New York. And I said, screw it. I'll make my own. I'll make my own show. I don't need the Real Deal. And that's when it took off to having, celebrity guests and entrepreneurs and all that. And then it took on a life of its own at that point. And we recruited up a storm. We added in 2019, we added an entire month's worth of company dollar as a result of agents that we recruited who found us because of the show in 2019.
Wow.
So that's how that
That's
came.
impressive, man. So how, like, reaching out to Ryan Serhant, how did you go from, screw it, I'm going to start a show, to Ryan Serhant as your first, reach out to a guest?
Well, he's the largest real estate. He's the largest, or probably the most famous realtor, at least in the country. So he was my first phone call. And then after that, I just blitzkrieged everybody. That's when I interviewed Elena Cardone and Jared Glant from Grant Cardone. I got Patrick Bet-David, Brad Lee. I'd have to go back, but now throughout the course of the show, I've had Grant Cardone on, the Wolf of Wall Street, and Bobby Castro, and Bedros Keuilian, and a bunch of different CrossFitters and celebrity, celebrity athletes and stuff like that. So that's how it kind of evolved. Then I'm just like, screw it, I'm going to interview people I like.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you start connecting people. So the way I got Grant Cardone on my show, granted, I had his wife on. Okay. Yep. And I know you interviewed Elena as well. I had Jared on. So I had his closest people. I had all his friends on. Okay. And I couldn't get Grant. I'm like, dude, I've interviewed everybody you know. Like,
yeah.
Following year, so this was last year, The Real Deal goes to put on their event. Okay. I asked to speak again. They told me no. Okay. I don't take it. I don't, whatever, dude. I don't care. Yeah. And I go to them. I go, well, how would you like to have Grant Cardone on your show at the event? They're like, oh, well, we don't know anybody there. I said, okay. So I called Jared because I got Jared's cell phone. I'm like, Jared, how would you like to get Grant in front of 5,000 people, 5,000 realtors who can buy your products, buy your 10X tickets, whatever. He's like, you can make that happen. I'm like, I can make it happen. I'll connect you with Amir
awesome.
with The Real Deal. And I had the publisher of The Real Deal on my show, by the way, and he still hasn't put me over there, but that's okay.
Oh my gosh.
But then I said, Jared, the only thing I asked for return is to get Grant on my show. He said, done. And that's how I got Grant on.
That's awesome. That's adding massive value and connecting the dots too.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. It's fun.
What overall, I mean, you've had some phenomenal guests on outside of Grant. What have been a few of your successful ways for connecting with these guests?
Instagram, man. In the beginning, Instagram. I Instagram DM'd so many people. And if I show you, okay, let me show you this. So have you ever heard of that show, Shameless on Showtime?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So one of my favorite actors on this show is a guy named Steve Howey. Okay. I haven't aired this episode because I didn't think it would have been, it wouldn't have passed the mustard test. It was a pretty cool interview, but not necessarily to be aired. So I'm gonna see if I can show you guys my phone here for a minute. Okay. Just so you can see. All right. So this is where it starts, where I DM him on Instagram. Okay. Look at this. That's all me.
Wow. So everybody listening, he's scrolling down through the DMs of just many messages, texting, video.
Okay.
That's wild.
Then he finally replies.
Unrelenting,
and
he says.
He goes, you're an inspiration, unrelenting. Dear God, man, why do you give such high praise to never stop asking for an interview? I'm like literally laughing out loud. Does that mean you're in? He goes, wow, I'm impressed with your outlook. Yes, I'm in. Let's talk tomorrow. I'm available after I drop the kids off at school at 9 a.m. I don't give my number out, but you are rare and you have a beautiful family. Lesson learned. Your social media tells your story. And he gave me his cell phone. And I told him at one point, I'm never going to give up. My wife calls me Mr. Persistence. He says, look at that. He goes, I got to be careful, make sure that, because his cell phone's there, so I don't want to do that. I want to hear, here, I'll do it like this. So you can see it. Look at the very top line. I want to hear the voice of Mr. Persistence.
Right? Nice. That's amazing.
Anyways. Oh, man. It's fun going back and thinking about all that stuff.
Yeah. That's some great takeaways. That's very similar to people ask me the same question. And I'm always curious to learn from other great podcast hosts like yourself. And I say very similar. It's Instagram DMs. It's so easy compared to other mediums like email or phone or whatever. I think it's one of the best ways to most quickly access like direct access to high profile people. You get direct access to their pocket. There's not really too many other ways to do that.
No, and then once you get to a point that you know enough people and you've gotten enough big people going, then all of a sudden you start leveraging that. And like, so if you
Right.
got somebody who's got their own show that's had guests on that you want to get on, and okay, I have my show, and you got guests that you've had on, I've got guests that you want to get on. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a mutual connection. You're going to help me out. I'm going to help you out. And then you have a direct line in. That's how I got Chris Voss, the author of Never Split the Difference, on. Was because of that, through a mutual connection.
That's amazing, man. We'll love what you're doing with the Closer Club. Excited to just watch that continue to grow.
Thank you.
Let's dive into our monumental questions.
Go for it.
Let's do it. What does success mean to you?
My family being happy, 100%. And moving to Texas. The interesting thing, my kids told my wife the other day, they're like, "We love it here." Like we weren't sure, you know. They're like, "We love the school, we love the sports, we love our friends, we love just the community atmosphere." And this was my 10-year-old saying this to my wife. Them being happy is, to me, number one by far. And then for me personally, professionally, is challenging myself, being comfortable with the uncomfortable, and then putting yourself in that environment and actually succeeding.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about morning habit or daily rituals that you have?
Work out every morning. Every morning. I hate the days off. I hate them because I'm not the same. I put a whole CrossFit gym in my garage to make it that much more accessible to me. And I did that before COVID. I did that like 4 years ago.
You know, so I have to say, I sent that picture that you posted of your garage. I sent that to my fiance. I was like, we need to get this.
Oh yeah, man.
We need this level of home gym.
Yeah, it's a CrossFit gym in my garage, pretty much.
That's awesome.
I love that thing. I love it.
What about favorite book or book you're currently reading?
Favorite book, Never Split the Difference. Chris Voss, by far, life changer. Life. I will never stop preaching that book, ever. Yeah. From how you communicate with your customers, how you communicate with your coworkers, how you communicate, for me, in recruiting, how I communicate with my wife, my kids. That to me is a game changer. And when COVID started and companies started doing reductions in salaries and all that stuff, both my parent companies had reduced salaries by 40%. And if they were going to look to me to reduce the salaries of my division by 40%, I knew it was coming. I took the principles out of the Never Split the Difference. I had an entire game plan set up, and I got them to agree to a 15% reduction instead of 40.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, take it and implement it. That's exactly right. Alex, phenomenal stuff. Lots of little golden nuggets throughout this episode. I got a lot out of today's episode. I know our Monumental listeners will as well. Just learning about, basically overcommitting to yourself, your vision, getting clear on your vision, being able to take life into your own hands in your terms, being able to connect and reach out to others at that influential level, and not being afraid to be persistent about it. There's just so many different things that our listeners are able to take away from today's episode. So first off, thank you for that.
No, and thank you to you for having me, man. I'm even honored to be considered. I know the guests you've had on, man. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. And then where can our Monumental listeners follow you or reach out to you?
Probably Instagram is going to be the easiest. So at Vidal Alex, VIDALALEX. From there, the link in the bio can take you to and it's open, so you can get in there. You can go to the YouTube page. All my views are actually on Facebook because I do it via Facebook Live. But if you want to see all the episodes in one location, the YouTube channel is the best. Yeah,
love it. Guys, take Alex up on that. He's got some phenomenal interviews with the Closer Club on Facebook or YouTube. And guys, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you like, subscribe, rate, and review today's episode. And also lastly, make sure that if you enjoyed today's episode, share it on social media, share it on Instagram, tag me, tag Alex, let us know you're listening. And guys, with that, have a monumental day.